Welcome back to In Focus. Muslim communities in Ohio are also feeling the impact of the Israeli-Hamas war. Ohio's Council on American Islamic Relations reports that since the war began, they've received nearly 200 reports of anti-Muslim and anti-Arab discrimination in just 1 month. That's more complaints than they received in all of 2022. Joining me now to talk more about it is Amina Barhumi, the executive director of the Council on American Islamic Relations of Ohio. That's also known as CAIR Ohio, C-A-I-R Ohio. Amina, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Your organization fights against Islamophobia every day. If you could pick out a few things, the biggest misconceptions maybe that people think of the Muslim or Arab communities.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole host, I think, of anti-Muslim tropes. I would say at the present moment, Islamophobia is presenting itself particularly in anti-Palestinian hate. Oftentimes, and I would say that's a direct result of our elected officials regurgitating propaganda directly from the Israeli apartheid government or standing in solidarity with just one side. And unfortunately, this places a target directly on Ohio Muslims' backs. And it's really imperative that we are careful when we use our words, particularly the ones that are exceptionally dehumanizing of Palestinians and directly dehumanizing of Muslims.
You think one of the issues is separating Palestinians from Hamas and saying supporting one doesn't mean the other?
Yeah, I think that this narrative of needing to condemn or needing to separate is part of the narrative of dehumanization. We can't, accept or justify this apartheid Israeli narrative. And so it's as if what happened on October 7th absolves Israel of all of its responsibility for its crimes against humanity before October 7th or anything after. And this is the language of dehumanization. The fact of the matter is that all reasonable people want violence to stop and that every human life is valuable, whether that be Palestinian or Israeli. And really the core issue is Israelis, apartheid Israelis' occupation and the denial of Palestinian rights.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying there can exist two wrongs. Very wrong what happened on October 7th, and also wrong what happened to Palestinians in many other instances. Is that what you're saying?
So what I'm saying is that what we're seeing as a civil rights organization, unfortunately, is really a double standard when it comes to speech. And so folks that are calling out the Israeli apartheid crimes and the crimes against humanity and the ongoing genocide and ethnic cleansing that is currently happening, unfortunately, are being targeted to be anti-Semitic. And the weaponization of this kind of language is unacceptable, and we call it out. And it's really important that we do not partake in this kind of narrative that is impacting young Muslims in schools, that is impacting employees that are being fired. The murder of a 6-year-old boy, the stabbing in Chicago, a murder of a Muslim woman in Texas, in Burlington, Vermont, the 3 Palestinian students who were targeted just for wearing a keffiyeh and speaking in Arabic. And so we want to be able to make sure that the narratives that we are using are not ones that dehumanize. And anyone that stands in opposition to Israeli apartheid and calls it out, whether that be in the streets or in school or on their private social media, should not be targeted. And it's not the same thing to oppose Israeli apartheid tactics and genocide and ethnic cleansing and call that out than, versus the bigotry towards Jewish people who, because they are Jews.
Yeah, on college campuses in particular, what do you make of free speech? And if it goes too far, some, students of Muslim students and Jewish students, there's been examples of that they're fearing for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we are currently in an environment in which there's a lot of fear mongering that is happening, and it is exceptionally important that we protect free speech on campus, and the ability to be able to speak up for human rights should not be conflated with fear mongering. I think right now what's really exceptionally important too as well is that we're seeing an exponential increase of asks and legal help, but particularly from students that are being targeted by groups that are pro-Israeli apartheid. And so the targeting or the conflating of anti-Semitism here is exceptionally important because oftentimes that's used to target students that are merely speaking up about their people that are being killed and their family members that are being killed, and oftentimes speaking up for human rights. And this is not just Muslim students. These are folks across the board. There's a robust, diverse group that stands in solidarity with Palestinians, and it's really exceptionally important to not conflate the two.
You're a huge supporter of the Palestinian people. Would it be best for them if Hamas is out, if they're not in charge? And then that's the first step to peace. Do you agree?
I would agree that the first and foremost step is that the Israeli apartheid military occupation stops its dehumanization and its displacement of the Palestinian people. Folks in the Jewish community, like the Jewish Voice for Peace, would agree with me that that is the crux of the violence that is happening. And until and unless that is addressed, unfortunately, we can never find a space in which freedom and peace and dignity exists for all people in all faiths.
Amina Barhumi, Executive Director of CARE Ohio. Amina, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And stay with